Welcome to Political Perspectives from the Washington Examiner. I'm Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. Please, if you're joining us on YouTube, like our channel, subscribe to it, and keep on coming back. I'm joined today, as I usually am, by Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent for the Washington Examiner. And Byron, I want you to talk about the demolition work at the White House. There's going to be building work, but obviously before building work, there's demolition work. And President Trump wants to build a ballroom, but there are people out there, notably Hillary Clinton, Gavin Newsom, who say that this is just an appalling thing that he's doing, that he's demolishing the White House like he's demolishing the Constitution. Can you separate the fact from the fiction for us?
Well, the question is, how much demolition is involved? First of all, there's no doubt that the White House needs a new ballroom, or an event space, you might call it today. The East Room of the White House, where they have state dinners, seats about 200 people, not really that big, and we've all seen really bigger White House events out on the lawn, or they'll build a big tent, they'll build kind of a huge outdoor facility, and it's kind of nuts. Why don't you need a bigger room? So I think there's just no doubt that, as the president says, they need a ballroom, they need a bigger room, and I believe future presidents will thank Trump for doing that.
Right.
So the question is, how much bigger and where do you put it? The White House complex is not very big.
Right.
And so you have the White House, the mansion, and then you have the West Wing, and then you have the East Wing. And so Trump has not been entirely clear about exactly where the new ballroom would go.
Right.
It was always going to be in the East Wing area.
Right.
But there were, if you look at the announcements at the end of July, at one point they say nothing's going to be torn down. At another point, Trump says, well, it'll be apart from it's not going to be part of, physically attached to the White House. But then at another part, when it's described, it said the ballroom will go where the East Wing is now.
Right.
And they were emphasizing that the East Wing has been changed and remodeled over the years. It was built in 1902.
Right.
A second floor was added in the 1940s. And so it's kind of like not the most historic thing in the world. It's okay.
Right.
Now, all of that being what it is, people were not really sure what the work would involve. And what happened was, they began to, a couple of days ago, demolition crews were in, they began to tear down the facade of the East Wing. It was basically a place where cars drove in under, and then everybody thought, okay. But then the next day they took out more.
Right.
And then, so the question now, as we speak, is, are they going to take the whole East Wing out, or are they going to change part of it, or what?
And the fact that we are asking that question now goes to something else which you just actually wrote about, I think, on social media yesterday, suggesting that the administration, the White House, that Trump himself has not really done a very good job on this. And it's rather important because it is the symbol of executive authority. It is the executive mansion. People have a kind of a fondness for it. PR is not usually something that Trump does poorly, but on this one, has he blundered?
Well, the White House has made the case that the White House has been changed physically many times over the years. They point out that in the 1940s, it was actually gutted. I mean, this is the White House itself, gutted, everything taken out except the exterior walls. And it was determined at the time that it was so old and rotten and fragile that they needed to do that.
Right.
Now, President Truman actually went to Congress and they passed a law to make this happen. And then Truman moved into Blair House for almost his entire term, his fully elected term, while the work was done.
Right.
So, I mean, that was huge. You see these pictures of just literally the outer walls of the White House, and you have these bulldozers on piles of dirt inside. So it's not as if this is a precious structure that has never been touched.
Right.
As a matter of fact, the only thing that's left of it is the outer walls. On the other hand, it is an important national monument and facility. There's the White House, the West Wing, and the East Wing. And if you're going to tear down one of the wings, you might want to really make that clear before the demolition truck shows.
So President Trump has sort of handed his opponents rather a gift in not being sufficiently explicit or persuasive about what was necessary. But the fact that we're talking about this latest outrage, if it is an outrage or horror, whatever, just a few days after the No Kings protests, suggests another thing to me, and that is a rather extraordinary ability of the organized left, whether that includes the congressional left or it's the more radicals on the outside, to turn on a dime and, as it were, to flip a switch and turn the outrage from one thing to the next thing. Are they just better at that than the Republicans?
Well, it depends on what you mean by better. I mean, they do it, and they're very agile at it. You're absolutely right. Trump says A, they become outraged. Next day, Trump says B, they're outraged, C, D, E, F, etc.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is that after a while, and it has been a while, a lot of the public begins to kind of tune them out.
Right.
Well, they're yelling about something again.
Right.
And they're always yelling about something.
Right.
And so you have the steady group of people who watch MSNBC, for example. They're outraged by everything, and that's fine. But whether a protest gets a lot of traction is unclear to me. Now they did. Now by their own count, I think they say they had 7 million people, and the whole idea was to have protests all around the country, so you could add them all up and say a total of 7 million people came, and that's not nothing. That's pretty big. If you had a television event that 7 million people watched, it wouldn't be the Super Bowl, but it'd be a lot bigger than a regular program.
Right.
So that's something.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are shrugging their shoulders.
Well, and so we've reported, as have others, that there was a lot of money put behind the No Kings protest, to the extent that there was a company financed by George Soros, the sort of radical left-wing billionaire who's been behind a lot of these sorts of things. There was a company that was doing data work and communications that was financed by him. There's a big communications network, it seems, and what I'd like to know is the extent to which, as I say, this is just another protest that can be, the flip a switch and the left brings out its people, and how much is it astroturf, as I think Senator Ted Cruz has said. That this is this a real expression of popular discontent with government, with Trumpian overreach, or is this just sound and fury signifying nothing?
Well, when you say astroturf, or when Cruz says astroturf, it kind of sounds like these are people who were hired, maybe paid to come protest. They don't really care, but if they're supposed to go out and yell at Trump and they get free lunch for it or something, and they do, maybe that would be astroturfing. There's plenty of opposition to Trump. I mean, we see it every day in the polls, and we've seen it for 10 years in the polls. So there's a significant number of Americans who not only don't approve of the job he's doing as president. That's around low 50s, low 50%. But then you have a smaller percentage who hate every single thing he does. Right. And that's big enough to put these people out on the street.
Sure. Just a day or two before the No Kings weekend, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
No Kings weekend.
Well,
what were you doing on No Kings weekend?
Just a day or two before, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that President Trump could go ahead with sending the National Guard to Portland. This had been, the sending of the National Guard, sending of troops, the militarization of his deportation efforts. It was one of the central themes of the protests during No Kings. But this appeals court, which is regarded as one of the most liberal left in the country, said that on the constitutional powers granted by the Constitution, etc., he was almost certain to win, therefore he could go ahead.
Yes.
So he's going to win some, he's going to lose some, but what we're seeing here is a president, is it not, definitely trying to establish executive authority again, I would say, after some decades of encroachments by the bureaucracy and by the courts. But the whole idea is that part of his presidency is to reestablish executive authority. That's what people who say that we're getting a monarch don't like. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I do think that some people on the left are getting a real lesson in Article 2 of the Constitution and the powers of the presidency. You could say they're getting it good and hard,
Right.
and they're not happy about it. But the Portland case was extremely clear. Right. Even though a district judge had ruled against Trump, the Ninth Circuit rules in favor of him, and basically there are protests all through the summer, violence at the ICE building in Portland, directed on toward trying to stop the workings of ICE and a federal facility. You have the police who just stand by, won't do anything. You have the governor who refused to call out the National Guard to protect this federal building. And the president finally federalized the National Guard to do it.
Right.
And it's just clear as it can be. He has the authority to protect this federal facility. And in other cases that are just completely different, like firing employees of the executive branch, we're learning the Second Amendment powers that the president had. I mean, you've got the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch. And the executive branch is the only one that is headed by a single person.
Right.
And if that single person can't fire somebody in the executive branch,
Right.
who can?
Yes.
So
That's a
these
good
are
question.
kind of basic lessons that the
Right.
Trump presidency is teaching.
Final question, and the fact that it is the final subject that I want to get to just shows kind of how it's been dragging on. We're now, I think, in the 4th week of the government shutdown.
We are.
Seems like Groundhog Day. There's a vote, and there's a vote, and there's a vote, and I don't know how many we've had, 10 or a dozen or something of that sort. Neither side seems to be crumbling. Is that right? And if it is right, why is it? And is there any end in sight?
It is right. And I think the amazing thing about that is that neither side seems to be scared.
Right.
They don't seem to think that there's a huge political downside in what they're doing. Now, it could be that on the Democratic side, Charles Schumer is doing what he's doing because he was so scared by what happened to him in March,
Right.
after the left viewed him as kowtowing to Trump and allowing a spending bill to pass, and he's afraid of being primaried by AOC or somebody. So maybe that's part of it. I don't really know. But certainly from the president's point of view, there's no fear at all in the White House. One of the reasons is that some of the worst effects of shutdowns have now been mitigated. It's been a while since during shutdowns it was decided that benefits checks would go out, that Social Security would go out, these things would be paid. And lots of other things are paid that don't shut down during a, quote, shutdown. And if you remember, a week ago, it was going to be the military's first scheduled paycheck since the shutdown began, and it was viewed by some as a real milestone. Now, when we hit this, when this happens, people will get very mad, and this thing will be settled. Well, Trump, a couple of days before that, just took it off the table by ordering the military to be paid. So of course they should be paid. I mean, that's not the question, but they were paid, and so that just no longer became a shutdown issue. And that's what's going on here. And I'm not saying this is the shutdown that nobody cares about, but certainly the level of public interest is much lower. The intensity is much lower than in the past.
Right, and the more you have these things, they come at a discount. So
exactly.
So anyway, that's where we'll leave it. Thank you very much, Byron. I expect that we'll be back again next week and perhaps talking about the same subject.
Shutdown week 5.
Even if not, there hasn't been much development. But we'll leave it right there. Thank you all for joining us on Political Perspectives. Join me and Byron again next week.